there is at times, I would say, a lazy line that one hears, that quote unquote war is good for the economy. There is nothing like that. That's true. War is destructive, and the market is assertively telling us that our collective self interest lies in moving away from war, not toward it. I think that's a very important lesson that one needs to keep in mind.
The Iran ceasefire may have pulled the region back from the brink, but it also opened up a much bigger question. What is peace actually worth? On the day the ceasefire was announced, economist, Princeton professor, SERP co founder, and board member, I could go on, Atif Mian, posted that the global stock markets added roughly $3.6 trillion in value. It was a striking way to think about that moment. And if Pakistan helped make that peace possible, what should it do with that opening? Today, we're talking to Atif Mia about Pakistan's peace pivot, the economics of de escalation, and whether this moment can be turned into something bigger than a fleeting diplomatic win. So, Atif, walk us through how you arrived at that number. And more importantly, what does it actually tell us about the economic stakes of peace versus war?
Thank you, Rimmel, for having me. So let's go back to April 7th. The world was on edge. President Trump had issued an ultimatum to Iran, and nobody really knew what was going to happen. But thanks to the quiet but consequential Pakistani effort, there was a joint announcement of a ceasefire and follow on talks. This is again, we are still on April 7th. And both the Iranian and the US leadership explicitly thank Pakistan's role. Now, what's interesting is that there is a prediction market for the likelihood of ceasefire. And on the morning of April 7th, the market was pricing ceasefire odds to be below 5%, so almost no hope. But when the announcement came, very quickly, this probability of a ceasefire rose to 100%. Now, this kind of sharp and unexpected shift in the probability of an important event is something that economists have historically used to estimate the value of the news in question. It is referred to as event study in this empirical methodology literature. In particular, the stock market response around that window, when the probability jumps, is a clean read of what this news is worth to the world economy. So, looking at global stock market, which totals around $125 trillion, we can see that the market quickly went up by close to 3 percentage points. And if you do quick maths, that turns out to be around $3.6 trillion of additional value created by this news of ceasefire. Um, One important observation, this number, $3.6 trillion, it reflects only a partial value of peace, if you will. The market was pricing at this news announcement a ceasefire whose durability was still very much uncertain and potentially in doubt. So, if peace holds and moves towards a real settlement, the gain should be considerably larger, actually, than the 3.6 trillion number that I gave you. Equally, on the other hand, if talks were to collapse, one hopes that doesn't happen, but if talks were to collapse, this gain can just as easily reverse. The broader point is that peace is highly valuable for the market and the world as a whole. Now, we can think a bit more about where this gain comes from the news of peace. So we can use some basic finance 101. There are two important channels here to consider. The first channel is the cash flow channel. Peace means more economic activity, stronger GDP, stronger profits, stronger wages, and all of this translate into higher value for the world. To give one example, the IMF already shaved global growth in its latest World Economic Outlook to reflect the war clouds that were on the horizon. And the stock market is telling us the same thing in the opposite direction, that when the prospects of peace rise, the world gains as a result of that. The second important reason for global market value to rise is what economists refer to as the discount rate. That is, war or conflicts in general, they add a risk premium. They widen spreads on bonds, for example, and that raises the price of risk on every risky asset, including the stock market. Uh, the news of peace, on the other hand, compresses that premium. And both these channels, the rising cash flows and the declining discount rate and spreads, both of them together push valuations up. So, this is a kind of what is happening in the background to raise global value as a result of this news about peace. Now, the broader point from all of this is quite simple. There is at times, I would say, a lazy line that one hears that quote unquote war is good for the economy. There is nothing like that. That's true. War is destructive, and the market is assertively telling us that our collective self interest lies in moving away from war, not toward it. I think that's a very important lesson that one needs to keep in mind. And in fact, more recently, again, because there is likely to be a second round of talks, and then people sort of the conflicting countries have toned down the rhetoric recently, and we have seen the market respond very positively to all such news. So once again, reinforcing the core idea that peace is good, peace is valuable. We all benefit as a result of that. Now, finally, there is an important point regarding who should we attribute this stock market gain to? Should we give all of this $3.6 trillion to Pakistan, for example? And it's important that while it is quite clear in my mind that the gain should definitely be attributed to the news of ceasefire, exactly who has how much role to play in that is, of course, much blurrier. We can squabble about who had how much role to play towards this news. But the broader point is that it should not be seen as only one country's win or one individual's win for that matter. It takes, as the saying goes, it takes many to tango in this case. And the news about peace was a collective effort. But of course, Pakistan deserves real credit for facilitating it. And as a Pakistani, one feels genuinely proud for the efforts towards peace that Pakistan has done and continues to do. But again, circling back, the real headline should be that peace is valuable. It is in our collective interest. We should cherish it. We should work toward preserving it. And it's terrific to see Pakistan play a very important role in all of this.
Thank you, Atif, from your mouth to God's ears. Um, Assuming that the ceasefire holds and Pakistan does get the lasting credit for helping to broker it, what is the right way for Pakistan to convert that diplomatic capital into economic gain? We surely need it.
Yeah, so when I posted that tweet that you mentioned, there was obviously a lot of reaction to it. Let me first push back on one reaction that I received on social media in response to my post. And that reaction was that because Pakistan has helped produce this incredible value of $3.6 trillion on a single day, maybe we should, ask for something in return. So this transactional idea that maybe now is the time to ask for a debt write down or demand a portion of this gain. I totally understand where it comes from, and I understand some people were saying this in jest, but I just want to emphasize that such a thinking is somewhat myopic in my view, and at some level it should or it is beneath the moment, so to speak. What is more important to understand is, especially from this moment, that Pakistan's first gain should be perceptual, not transactional. We wish everyone the best. The saving of innocent lives by itself should be enough of a return. And that is the posture that the country that wants to be taken seriously at the global stage as a peacemaker, that should be the stance that the country should adopt and also sort of live that stance, not just say it in words. Having said that, there is, of course, a very real economic prize for Pakistan in all of this. And that prize, in my view, is much bigger than any debt write off that we could negotiate. That real economic prize is the possibility of, let me just call it a structural pivot. And we can name it, I'm going to just call it the peace pivot. So, what is it? This is precisely where Pakistan has this opportunity that it can deploy its diplomatic leverage that it has just earned, not to sort of ask for handouts, but to push country by country, one conversation at a time, but to push very deliberately towards new structural arrangements that pivot Pakistan in a new strategic direction economically. So that's what I mean by referring to this as the peace pivot. Let me give three sort of specific examples or elements of this peace pivot that Pakistan should sort of lobby for. The first one is regional trade and connectivity. Unfortunately, for decades, Pakistan's economy has largely been hamstrung by the fact that it barely trades with most of its neighbors, including its western neighbors on its western border. This can now change. That's the great opportunity that this occasion gives us. Iran is obviously the first step towards it. The relationship between the two countries in terms of trade can and should run both ways. Iran can be a major energy supplier to Pakistan, and Pakistan, in turn, has a great deal to offer Iran. Iran, for example, has, I know this as an academic, it has great universities. I would say some of the strongest in the region in terms of the quality of the faculty and the students there. And historically, they just have a great tradition of learning and have done extremely well on the international stage in math, in engineering, in sciences. Pakistan, on the other hand, has a huge young population. So there is a real potential for learning in both directions. And of course, the cultural and linguistic connections are already there. Farsi is very much embedded in our language, in our culture. Again, there is this great opportunity to benefit from greater trade and integration. So that's one element of this new strategic direction that Pakistan needs to very aggressively lobby for, to build regional trade. And I've given Iran as an example, but of course, now that this conduit opens up, Pakistan should go much beyond, integrating in a much more durable way trade with the Gulf countries and also trade with Turkey. So this whole regional bloc of Iran, Turkey, the Gulf countries, with Pakistan being sort of this central player that it is emerging, it should really use this opportunity to build for greater economic integration. The second element of, again, what I'm calling the peace pivot should be real integration of some complementary nature with all of these countries that I've just mentioned. And I want to be careful what I mean about integration with these regional economies here. For example, historically, our relationship with Gulf has been one way. We send blue collar labor who send back remittances. Of course, every one of those workers deserves our respect, but that is not proper economic integration. It's more transactional, in my view. Integration is measured in codependency. Pakistan should be exporting to this region as much as it imports from this region. And then the import should be of different types. For example, Pakistan, the industries should be interconnected. So we are supply chains for each other. We trade in intermediate goods back and forth across borders, across industries. It should be multifaceted, not just goods, but services as well. Communication and integration in academia, in technology transfer, conversations and conferences that rotate across the region so that Arab, Iranian, Turkish, Pakistani researchers and firms can connect with each other on a regular basis, or if they're moving through each other's ecosystems. Young people are integrated with each other in a much more sort of cohesive way. uh, you know, studying at each other's universities. The broader point is we need to build these relationships across all dimensions so that this integration, that the regional integration that I'm referring to, is again not just transactional, but it is durable. And also from a strategic security perspective, I would add these linkages are also our best bet as a long run insurance policy for peace itself. Because the more economies and people are codependent, the more visible the cost of conflict becomes. And that is really the best way to avoid conflict and war in this region in the future, to have a direct stake in each other's success. I should also add that since, given where the global economy has headed over the last couple of decades, in my view, it is no longer possible to grow solely on the back of manufacturing driven exports, kind of to grow the way the East Asian economies did in the past. And so it's really more important than ever for countries like Pakistan that need growth to rely on regional connectivity of the sort that I just described, because that allows you to grow not just on a through a single kind of manufacturing margin, but it allows you to grow through a much broader, diverse economic activity through engaging in not just trade in goods, but as I mentioned, also services, by taking advantage of greater mobility across the regional economies for Pakistan. So it's really an extremely important strategic point. The third and last element of what again I'm referring to as the peace pivot should focus on making Pakistan not just connect regionally in the way that I've just tried to describe, but also globally. Pakistan has the potential to, I would say, reignite and redevelop its status as a global hub that actually, to some extent, used to be the case if you go back to the 60s and perhaps early 70s. The country was a genuine global destination. For example, it was on the backpacker circuit, if you will, a stop for travelers from all over the world. It has incredible nature and culture to offer to the rest of the world. And so our airports, our seaports, they should be seen as regional transit points for goods, services, people. And we really need to work aggressively towards making that a reality again. Unfortunately, just to give you a small but telling example, we have completely kind of gone in the opposite direction. Pakistan currently does not have a single direct flight to the United States. It's quite incredible. I mean, pretty much every country in the world, even small countries, have direct flights to the US, but Pakistan does not. We really need to aim for towards developing Pakistan as this global hub that I just mentioned. We should aim to have, just to pick up on the same US example, multiple daily flights from Pakistan directly to US and Europe and other parts of the world. Every extra stop that you add to get to Pakistan, you should think of that as a tax that we are living on investment, on flow of tourism, of ideas, of people, because time is value, of course. So really, Pakistan needs to double down on its on its efforts now that there is an opening for Pakistan, given all of those global world events. Let me sort of sum all of this up by emphasizing the broader point in all of this. The real prize to come out of this global recognition that Pakistan is having right now, the real prize is not something like debt write off. It is trade, it is regional integration, and it is making Pakistan rise up in its global standing by being respected as a peaceful member of the international community. And Pakistan should leverage what it has just earned to actively secure these advantages. Again, opening borders with Iran, signing rail trade agreements with these regional economies. Turkey, once again, is a very important country in this regard, and negotiating, direct transactional, routes and flights and institutional links that can unlock the great potential that Pakistan can have.
You've described a very ambitious external, or as you're calling it, the peace pivot. But I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done in Pakistan domestically. So, as you know, as any by most accounts, Pakistan's domestic politics and economy are quite fragile. So, what domestic policy change would you recommend to reinforce Pakistan's new external strategy that you've suggested?
Yeah, so I focused on kind of the external dimension of this peace pivot. But the external dimension only works if there is a parallel domestic pivot, if you will, that runs alongside it. Now, um, as Pakistan seeks to project its new peaceful image to the outside world, it must at the same time establish that reality within its own borders as well. Otherwise, that reality will sort of outstrip the any temporary outside perception that Pakistan gains from what has just happened. Unfortunately, much has happened in the last few decades, where peace has gradually diminished inside Pakistan, and one must confess that this is partly the result of states' own follies on occasion, where differences within have been exploited to gain a short term political advantage. For example, supporting sectarian outfits that thrive on generating hate, on stirring raw emotion. External forces have, of course, exploited these fissures at times, but it is up to us to reverse this course, to actively build peace within our borders as much as we facilitate this outside of our borders. And we can do so by bringing our own people together across various lines, whether those are religious, sectarian, linguistic, ethnic, provincial. Along all of these dimensions, which are natural sort of identities of an individual, we need to do different. We need to work differently. We need to work towards bringing people together, and the past has to change in this regard. Now, let me try and give some specific, concrete suggestions in this regard, specifically in terms of what the state can do. First of all, I think the state needs to very clearly distinguish in terms of its own reaction, distinguish between violent dissent from non-violent dissent. And it should treat them very differently. It's understandable, everyone recognizes that the state needs to maintain a monopoly on violence, and it needs to deal with force at times against those who uh, continue to engage in violence, who continue to kill innocent civilians. I completely recognize that the state needs to deal with those elements with force. However, it is equally important to discriminate between these individuals or groups and those who are not using violence to air whatever grievances they may have. And so the same broad brush of force or suppression should not be used against every dissenting voice that the state faces. Um, in particular, sort of wherever people are using non-violent means to air grievances or to disagree with the state should lean in, not clamp down. This is exactly the posture that Pakistan has just advocated externally. Just to give an analogy, it has, asked the warring factions to use diplomacy rather than force to resolve their disputes. The same attitude needs to travel inward as well. And it has to cut across political parties as well, across political divides as well. That's another very important dimension. We have had too many cycles of whoever is in power today treating the other party as something to be crushed. Uh, we cannot afford to keep going through these cycles. Everyone shares in this blame, but I think this can be a moment to turn a new leaf. And this can be an important moment where, as sort of a signal of goodwill, the political parties also reach across the aisle and work towards political conciliation. The second important element of this domestic peace pivot in my mind is for the state to enforce what is already granted as constitutional fundamental rights of equality and individual freedom to its people in letter and spirit. This is again something that has continued to erode over time, over the past few decades. Um, in fact, the state should try to build this reality of what the Constitution grants to its people. It needs to build that as a reality through actions like changing curriculum in how and what we teach our kids, in the way we communicate through media to the people on a regular basis. Our schools should actively teach children against this idea of hate speech, which you can still see, unfortunately, at times, sort of, graffitied on the walls against this community or that sect, or using a particular derogatory language against one ethnic group or another. Kids should actively learn when they are growing up that what makes Pakistan beautiful is its diversity, its diversity in its practices, in its beliefs, in its languages, and these differences should be celebrated, not feared. That's the key point. We insisted that the sort of the world come together, but we need to do the same within. That more cohesive and attitudes of goodwill should be promoted. Otherwise, if you promote or look away when others are promoting hate speech, this is like polluting your own common pool with poison, and we need to actively work against that. The benefit of doing so, the benefit of a society that teaches its children these basic civic values is that the society then learns to regulate itself. You do not need to police the people to do the right thing. It is the people themselves who would stop each other from divisive or hateful speech, for example. Even a child can reprimand a hate monger to say, that is no way to speak. And it is this kind of policing by conscience that builds true durable peace inside the country. And this is what the state should actively work towards. And we need to sort of develop a strategic plan for doing so. Let me just sort of close this last point by saying that the reason, or one of the most important reasons in my mind, that I keep talking about Pakistan, even when I, okay, on occasion, criticize the government for its policies, is that I fundamentally believe that the country has huge potential and that there is a better way. And if we all work towards a new direction, Pakistan's future can be very much different from its past. And perhaps, there is a moment right now, an opportunity that, given the prominent position that Pakistan has found itself on the global stage, that we can really use this opportunity to signal a very different Pakistan moving forward by pivoting in this new direction and adopting this peace pivot, as the saying goes, carpe diem, one needs to seize the moment. And this is potentially a moment for Pakistan.
Excellent advice. I hope it reaches the right people. And the truth is that even if we can quantify peace's value as $3.6 trillion, I think everything that you've described goes well beyond even that. So we're looking at a potential of an unknowable number if we were to follow your advice. So thank you, Atif. I really hope that we're looking at better days ahead, less war, more peace, and may we heed minds like yours because everybody feels smarter around you. So I hope they can do the same, or you can do the same for the people who listen to this video. Thank you for your time.